The diet I chose to focus on is intermittent fasting and how it impacts metabolic health. My big question is, does intermittent fasting improve metabolic health compared to continuous calorie restriction? Before comparing intermittent fasting to regular calorie restriction, it is important to understand what intermittent fasting actually means. Intermittent fasting is not necessarily a specific diet where certain foods are completely banned. Instead, it is an eating pattern that alternates between periods of eating and periods of fasting. One common example is the 16-8 time-restricted eating, where someone fasts for 16 hours and eats during an 8-hour window. Another version is an alternate day fasting, where fasting or very low calorie days alternate with eating days. There is also the 5-2 method, where a person eats normally for 5 days of the week and restricts calories on 2 days. So the main difference is that intermittent fasting focuses on when you eat, while a regular diet focuses on what you eat. Now that we know what intermittent fasting is, the next question is how it compares to traditional calorie restriction. While intermittent fasting with intermittent fasting, the main focus is on meal timing. A person limits eating to a certain window of time, which may give the body longer periods of time without incoming food. During those fasting periods, the body may start relying more on stored energy, such as fat. Continuous calorie restriction is different because the main focus is on reducing the total amount of calories every day instead of changing when someone usually eats. This method usually lowers the amount of food or calories eaten across the whole day. This comparison matters because some people believe intermittent fasting has special metabolic benefits beyond just eating fewer calories. However, the research suggests that both methods can improve metabolic health. The key question is whether fasting provides extra benefits compared to regular calorie restriction. According to an article called Flipping the Metabolic Switch, intermittent fasting may affect metabolic health because the body changes how it gets energy during fasting. After eating, the body mostly uses glucose from food as its main energy source, and insulin levels can rise to help more glucose into cells. But during fasting, there is less glucose coming in from food, so insulin levels begin to decrease. As the fasting period continues, the body starts relying more on stored fat for energy. Some of this fat can also be converted into ketones, which the body can use as another fuel source. The author describes this process as metabolic switching, where the body shifts from using glucose to using fat and ketones. This may improve metabolic flexibility, meaning the body can switch between fuel sources more efficiently. According to a study published in Cell Metabolism, researchers tested whether time-restricted feeding could protect metabolic health in mice eating a high-fat diet. One group of mice could eat throughout the day, while the other group ate during a restricted daily time window. What makes this study interesting is that the number of time-restricted mice it what makes the study interesting is that the time-restricted mice ate a similar number of calories compared with the mice that ate freely. The main finding was that the time-restricted feeding group was protected against obesity and several metabolic problems. This supports the idea that meal timing may affect metabolism, not just calorie intake. However, this was an animal study, so it does not prove the same effects will happen in humans. It is useful evidence for the mechanism, but we still need human studies to compare intermittent fasting with traditional calorie restriction. According to a randomized clinical trial, researchers compared alternate day fasting with daily calorie restriction and a control group in adults with obesity. The alternate day fasting group had fasting or very low calorie days alternating with normal eating days. The daily calorie restriction group reduced calories more consistently every day. The study found that alternate day fasting did lead to weight loss, but it was not better than daily calorie restriction for weight loss, weight maintenance, or cardioprotective markers. In another similar randomized control trial published in Clinical Nutrition, researchers compared intermittent energy restriction with continuous energy restriction in adults with central obesity. The goal was to see whether intermittent restriction was better for cardiometabolic health, including markers related to glucose, metabolism, fatty acid metabolism, and overall metabolic risk. This study found that intermittent restriction and continuous restriction produced similar effects on most markers of cardiometabolic health. There were some differences in glucose and fatty acid metabolism, but overall, intermittent restriction was not clearly superior. This study is important for my research question because it directly compares fasting style restriction with the more traditional daily calorie restriction approach. The takeaway is that intermittent fasting can be helpful, but the evidence suggests it may work about just as well as a regular calorie restriction rather than dramatically better. Looking across the evidence, intermittent fasting does appear to have potential benefits for metabolic health. According to the second article I referenced, fasting may support metabolic switching, while the body shifts from using glucose to using more stored fat and ketones for energy. However, when intermittent fasting is compared directly with continuous calorie restriction in human studies, the results are more balanced. So the overall answer is that intermittent fasting can be a useful strategy, but it does not seem to be automatically better than traditional calorie restriction. Its benefits may depend on whether a person can follow it consistently. As a final takeaway, um, in terms of general dieting, it seems that meal timing might help some people. Calories still matter a lot more, but the most important part of a successful diet is consistency. Yeah, so the best conclusion is the most effective approach to one's diet is one that they can follow consistently.